Hi there, I'm John and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm John from Nigeria, and if you are new here, welcome. On this channel, I review books. I mostly do them through like the singular traditional book review style, but also sometimes through like collective wrap-ups, which we'll be doing today. And today will be my June wrap-up. And for occasional subscribers, if I'm talking very fast, it's because I have something to do by 4 p.m. So I'm trying to like make this probably going to be the fastest I have talked today, and it's actually the most books I read in June. I read like 6 books. Yes, I read 6 books in June, and yeah, there's nothing to talk about. Let's get into it. And also, if you have not checked out my mid-year freak out video where I review like the where I do that tag where I analyze my reading for the first half of the year, it's the last video before this one, so thank you very much. So the first book I finished in June was Assembly by Natasha Brown, and this is a very slim work that kind of had a moment on like the bookish space, let's say about 2 years ago. I think 2 years ago, yes, and it follows a black woman in London or in UK. She's in one of the two. I cannot remember, but I chose to read. I but read this with a friend actually, and I chose this for us because it was a book that people always talked about how it did so much in so little, and how it was an innovative novel for it's when it came out. Like that was the most comments I heard. And yeah, so it followed a woman in the UK, and the central premise is just like a 100-page novel. The central premise is that she's going to visit her boyfriend's family. Her boyfriend, who is white, she's black, so it's a very like white family, and it comes from like very good money for a white person. So she's going to visit his family, and at the same time we get this narrative style where she's kind of telling us about her life in a way. And it's at the beginning I found like the style very confusing, because we do not implicitly get told that she's black, but you get to deduce the fact that she's black from the little insights of things like microaggressions at work, and they're just indications that, oh, you can tell this might not be a white person. And that's really like the narrative voice taking at the beginning of the novel. For most of the novel, it's a woman who is ruminating on her life as a black woman who has kind of achieved like success in a way that like you do not usually expect from black people, especially in the UK, and being a woman. And so it's that kind of, she looked, I think one of the good things I did like about what Brown did with the novel was that she looks at this idea of like making it as a black person, and how that is kind of, you do not just make it for yourself, you make it for your family in a way as well. You make it for the people who are coming before you and who have kind of set up like, so it also looks at the idea that there's this kind of this thing constructed about how a person who is black has to like do double the work, has to go like double extra mile to hit what like the regular white person will have to achieve, because like there's so much that is riding on you. And our narrator, essentially, she's not anti this, but she's looking at how this has been alive for a long time and how it kind of gets exhausting. And at the same time, there's this insert of a certain allusion to an illness that she might have, and this illness is inserted at certain points in the story, where we learn that she's visiting like a doctor or something. And I did kind of find the insert of the illness to be like maybe one of the most annoying things in the novel, because I did not see like it leading anywhere, although our narrator kind of analyzes this illness that she has suddenly developed. I think there's like the idea that it might be cancer or something, and she kind of looks at this illness as her road to freedom, where she has been like chasing and trying to like hit so many goals over the course of her life, because she's a black woman, and trying to essentially make it for her family. But then this illness might be the thing that frees her. And so I do think there are like interesting things in the novel. I just found the style to be quite annoying, and I don't want to use the word annoying, but there was just something off about the abstract nature. Yes, that's what I do not have notes. Like I usually have little notes, but I did not have time to prepare for this. So but I think in my notes, one of my major major gripes was the abstract style, because I did not find that it served much to like the telling of the story, and I felt I do not think it was being inventive for the sake of being inventive in this style. But at the same time, I think it's that kind of thing where you try to attempt something and it does not work. And so that was kind of that was where I fell with the novel. I gave it like a 2 stars and kind of found the praise for it to be excess in a sense. I found it overhyped from what I had heard, and my friend who I body read with also said had the same opinions as me. So yes, it's a nice book. Oh God, you just saw my very sweaty hands. That's how I sweat in my hands. I'm so sorry. But yeah, it's a nice book. I don't just know that I loved what the style like kind of did to it, because I think the style did something to it that was not the best. And I just felt like in a very succinct novel, you are spending so much time doing like this abstract thing where like you have just 100 pages, so how much are you going to give us in 100 pages? And she does do some nice examinations. I don't just know that it was like the greatest thing ever. So yeah, that's Assembly. Next book I finished was The New Me by Haley Butler, and this was the author's like second novel, and I read this because I thought it fell in that category of like the depressed woman in her 20s just moving through life, which it does. And certain people who I know and who I follow have read it, like Alex and some other people, and they have always liked it a fair amount. But then I read it and I hated this novel. I hated it. I don't think I've hated a book as much this year. And I am currently working on a review for it, a written review. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. But we follow a woman, Millie. She's in her, I think, mid-20s. And in like the style of this novel, in the style of this subgenre, she is very, very depressed. She hates her life, she hates her job, she's unemployed at point, and eventually gets like this little job as a research. She gets a little job as a receptionist, working at the front desk of I think it's like kind of an artsy something. I don't know if it's like a furniture house or something, but she gets a job working as a receptionist, and the entirety of the book is her complaining about how much she hates this job, how depressed she feels. The worst part of this book is the tone, the voice. I kind of feel like the author's hand is so at the front of the narrator's voice that it's like the worst that I've seen. Like, I do get the idea of like the unlikable narrator, and the issue here is not with the narrator being unlikable. The issue is rather with her voice, the character voice normally, and that's something I really like. That kind of makes a book for me, how intriguing the voice of the character is in the novel, because in a way it's the author's voice, and here you can see that it's so much the author's voice that it's more imposition of like a certain tone on the character, like having to have this not just depressed outlook on life, but it is just so grating in the sense that it is like excessive self-deprecation, and like it's not even the idea that there's no happiness in the novel, because there's no happiness in My Year of Rest and Relaxation, and that's one of my favorite books that I have read in recent memory. But I just think that this is one of those novels that feel like I don't want to use the word copycat because it's a bit like harsh, but it feels like it's derivative of that work, and it's like since that time there has been a slew of novels on this like certain depressed woman style that has come out. And it's not saying that Moshfegh was the first author to do it, and so like I just found like this one to be just like the worst in terms of tone and style of this particular type of novel. And it's not even like saying it's boring, because I would not say I was bored throughout. I would not say I was bored throughout, but I cannot also say that it gave me much. It did not give much. And there was the major side character is the narrator's friend. What we get with the narrator's friend is just a character who is kind of a prop for the narrator to run to complain to when like her job is not going well or something is happening at the job. And that is like, I just found her so stiff. There was no purpose of her in the entire novel, because I cannot imagine a character having the same exact tone for the entirety of a novel where they reoccur. Like, there's no variation to her, there's nothing of intrigue to the novel, there's nothing to write home about it. And the most annoying part of it is that this is not a debut. There are things that I feel we can forgive like a debut novel for doing, and it's just, this is her second novel. So I hated it. I gave it 1 star. I would have given it half if I do that sort of thing, but I gave it 1 star. And I kind of do not want to read her again. But there's her most recent work, Banal Nightmare, which came out like, I think last month or 2 months ago. Nathan from Nathan's Nook, who is like my darling Nathan, he kind of likes it a lot. And I've seen like I saw somebody who I follow on Instagram call it a future modern classic, which I found outrageous in a way, even though I had not read it, because like, I just read this author. So am I not expecting, like, even though it's not the same thing, am I not expecting something a bit similar in terms of style, since it's like it's the same author? But I don't know, the Nathan especially makes me want to read this like novel, read the new novel. So I might go for it. We'll see about that. But yeah, the new me. So the next book I finished was Kentucky Rich. I know this thing is not inverted because of how my phone camera is set up, but it is one, you can clearly tell it's one of those mass market books. And little story behind this is that this is a trilogy, and if the second book, Kentucky Hits, this was the first book I ever bought with my money. This was the first time I ever purchased a book back in 2019 February. I can remember where I bought it from. We were having our inter-house sports in my high school year, and yes, so I saw that was the first time I was seeing books to buy, because I had always borrowed up until then. And I was like, oh wow, it's just 600, I might just buy it. I really would love to own like one book for the first time, and because I've been borrowing a lot. And so I just took out the 600 and bought this book. And yes, I think I read it in 2021, and I did not love it, but for a mass market work, it kind of did like the entertainment enough that I needed. It kind of made me, there were very sweet moments. And so for some reason, I decided to chase the whole collection at the fair, because I think the first year they came, or the second time I saw them here, they had the second work, which I already owned. So I was like, oh, there's a chance that I might see the first and the third work. So I did eventually get to see all like 3 of them, the remaining 2 there. And yes, I read this Kentucky Rich, the first book, in June. I read it in like 13 days, even though it's almost 400 pages. But it was a period where like there was no light for a good portion of the time. So I was just like consuming it and reading it voraciously. And I was not loving it, but it was something I could stomach, because there were like sweet moments I could tolerate inside. And oof, do I still have time? I have 4 minutes, okay. And we follow a woman, Nicole Diamond, who kind of runs away from home when she's 18, because she gets pregnant at 17, gives birth at 18, and her father is like the stereotypical rancher who does not want to keep the child, and she's kind of like the most detested child of the father, even though he kind of does not like any of the children. And so after he threatens to like send the child to the orphanage, she runs away. Her brother helps her escape, and she gets in their family ranch, takes a bit of dirt from the family ranch to keep as memories, takes her daughter, and he tells her to drive to, I don't know if he tells her to drive to Kentucky, but he just tells her to drive. Yes, so it just tells her to drive and to stop at the nearest ranch she sees that they'll take her in, because she's very good like with the ranch work, the horses. It is said that she's even better than her brothers, and that's what she does. And she kind of does the thing, drives away, and when she kind of stops on the road because the car breaks down, she's very hungry, the child has not been fed, she's very sick at the same time. A family, the nearest ranch close to them, the owner Maud and her partner Jess see her and they take her in, and that's the beginning of this story that follows a span, like a good chunk of her life. We follow her from when she's 18 to when she grows up, and it is ranch, it is horses, it is very, there's very annoying moments in the writing because it's what is expected of this kind of genre and this kind of style. The whole Danielle Steele and her line of people after that. But I took some respite in it. I enjoyed a good portion of it. Just the story, there were very warm moments inside of it, like story wise, if you could just like overlook the writing. And I liked a good portion of it. I gave it 3 stars. So yeah, I've officially read the first and second book, but although I wanted to be spontaneous and adventurous, I don't think I'll be doing like any of the, I don't think I'll be doing the third book. I don't know that I can stomach the writing for a third time. So but yeah. Oh, the fourth book, I is one I'm so excited to talk about because I have been waiting to talk about it for since I read it, and I was so lazy to make a separate video. But it's Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, which I mentioned in my mid-year video as my favorite book of the year so far. As at the time I read it, although that has changed, but still, it's still high there. And yes, I read my first Baldwin finally. I bought, I think I own two other of his works, Go Tell It on the Mountain and Another Country. And so yes, I knew I wanted to read him because he's one of the American greats regarded. And so, but I think in June it was very, there was like a very summary vibe, and I'd heard that Giovanni's Room was very short. So I don't know, on impulse, I just started it one day, and at the beginning, I found that I liked Baldwin's writing. He has the best first, I would say first chapter because that I've read in a while, because I'm not really a first sentence person or a first page person, but the first chapter just kind of drew me in, even from the first page, the way the narration went, like the way he says, like, by this time tomorrow, da 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 da. I cannot remember the exact sentence, but it kind of caught my attention. And yes, so Giovanni's Room follows our main character, David, who goes to Paris for, who kind of escapes to Paris like for a couple of years, and we meet him at the beginning of the novel when he tells us that by this time tomorrow, like a guillotine would have split the neck of Giovanni, who will come to learn about in the as the novel progresses. So we learn that David is an American who ran to Paris, and he's trying to find his life there. He's living on little to no money. He's oscillating between having some and having nothing at all. And we just learn of his life coming leading up to the time in Paris in the first chapter, and progressively we see that David eventually meets a should I call him a waiter called Giovanni, a bartender, it feels like a bartender called Giovanni, in one of the little bars he visits from time to time where he has a friend there. And so he meets the bartender Giovanni, and Giovanni's Room is kind of a, I would say it's a tragic love story of sorts, because there's like and there's a romance that ensues between Giovanni and David. Even though we learned that we learned that David kind of has like a fiance who has traveled for a while to go and find herself. The book kind of chronicles like how the romance between Giovanni and David takes shape and takes form, and what it does to both of their lives. And so it's David who, through David's character, Baldwin examines repressed homophobia in David, and so it kind of looks like him. And so we kind of see how he's kind of the person who, although he's indulgent, but he has not gotten to this stage of acceptance. And so the book is really looking at David existing on that on that level where he indulges, but he has not gotten to the plane of acceptance yet. But regardless, I think the romance takes him by surprise, or like just falling in love with Giovanni, and it just kind of opens his world, and he suspends Hela, who is engaged to, in the ether while she has traveled to Spain. Yes, I remember. It looks at how like that's it looks at the way love always goes in a sense, or like this kind of stories where there is the romance which is fiery and it's burning, but like eventually there's the suspected end, which we can tell that there's an end from the beginning or from the first page, because he literally tells us that something will be happening to Giovanni. But it's how we get to this end that the book looks at. And I have to say, well, while the book was moving, I was kind of impressed with Baldwin's writing, because he has one of those like writings that, oh, just hits you. But I did feel there were points where it was he does too much in his writing, a bit over. I would not say overwritten necessarily, but I just felt like a bit too pandery in the idea, in the attempt to like wow the reader with style. So he has that kind of voice, but I think progressively, while I was like going and I was like, oh, this is nice, but it's not like blowing me away. The final two chapters on this book are the greatest two chapters I have ever read. Not ever, but maybe ever, because I was moved. I finished it one morning. I just powered through the remaining, I think 40 to 60 pages that morning, and oh my gosh, the final two chapters are something. I think that's the most I have felt. Like there was so many visceral emotions I had just from like reading through the world, and just how Baldwin just looks at the way this love kind of descends into nothingness, and the consequences it has on both their lives, and the way it also has consequences on Hela's life. And just I don't want to say too much to spoil or to like give to, because it's a very short book, and like it almost feels like there's not so much that happened in between except just chronicling this love. But at the same time, it just becomes a boat for Giovanni, who does not have too much, but David goes to stay in his room because he has gotten to a point where he's poor, and they just kind of create this world for themselves. So what Baldwin explores is just the kind of love, but at the same time resentment that David has towards Giovanni, but it's not really towards Giovanni, it's rather towards himself. And so it's just a book. It's one of those times where you read a very popular, a very renowned work that people say is so good, and it lives up to the hype. It's one of those classic works that it does what people say it does. And while it took time to hit me, I would say those final two chapters just completely, the writing in them is something else. Like the emotions, like I think throughout the novel I was constantly saying Baldwin has like, he knows how to write conversations. It's not dialogue, it's conversations. It's like two characters who are interacting, but they feel so, it's like you are listening in on them, and you are feeling like things from listening in on their conversation. And I was so moved by it, and yes, I gave this 4.5 stars. And yes, Baldwin, I cannot wait to read more of him. And he has lovely Paris descriptions, like it has lovely setting description in this too. So it is a classic for a reason, and it did all the things it had to do to me. And I do think the supporting characters in this book carry the book more than the lead character, who is David. They just give so much more. I think they are the ones who made the book for me. The next book I finished was Friendaholic: Confessions of a Friendship Addict by Elizabeth Day. And this is a collection of personal essays, sort of memoir collection of personal essays that is centered around examining friendship as a concept, but she does it through her life and through her friendships. And every chapter is kind of dedicated to a friendship from her life. And friendship as a concept has always been like very important to me. Like people who know me in my personal life know that it's kind of maybe the most important thing to me, and I classify it as equally as affecting as romantic relationships. And it kind of looks at also how people kind of tend to set romantic relationships so far higher than friendships, and how they really just equally like they really just equally feel like the same thing and like have the same impact on the life of some people, like me example, and we kind of see it through Day's life. And I have a review actually coming for this, so I will not be speaking too much on it, but I really enjoyed the collection. It took me a year to read it. I started this book in June 2023 and I finished it in June 2024. And it took me a year because there was a break in between where I was not reading it at all, because I don't know, it kind of felt quite long, but I do not think like that is anything on the book, because going back to think on what it offers and how through Day's life and through our friendships, every friendship kind of looks at these things that it's not like people do not talk about them, but it's like they are seen as trivialized in a sense. Things like friendship breakups, ghosting in friendships, like the idea of being a best friend and what that means, and like the boundaries in friendships, internal circle friendships, external circle friendships, like these things that people tend to overlook in a sense, because like romantic relationships all the time and at the forefront. And so I really liked that was why I picked it up. I just really like friendship as a subject, and I was so glad that she delivered on every front. And most of the essays are really good. Some really emotionally affecting one here as well. I think it was like writing my review and just going through my thoughts of the book that I just got to appreciate it so much more, and I appreciated what they does with the book. And yes, I really enjoyed it. I gave this 4 stars. My final book for June was The Client by John Grisham. He's a popular, should I say, mystery thriller crime law author. That's strange, but yes, that he is the mass market that I go for, and that he never fails me. And this I chose for Big Book Summer. This is one of the books I had finished, and I liked it. I liked it quite decently. I think progressively since reading The Firm by him twice. That's one of my favorite books. I don't think he has kind of hit that peak for me. And maybe I read The Firm where I had not fallen into like my whole like literary fic thingy, and so I was not too critical on writing. But since then, my eyes have been more exposed to like what I seek for in writing. But minus what I seek for in writing, I do think he makes up for that with like what he gives in terms of stakes for a novel of this kind. I don't know if to say mystery or thriller now, but crime fiction. It's kind of crime fiction and law fiction too. So it kind of makes up for it with the stakes, because the stakes are always high. Your pulse is always racing. But it was just that high stakes sort of drama book, and it's one of those kind of comfort for fun reads for me, and it was quite big. It was like over 500 pages, so I do not have my copy here because I gave it out. But yeah, I enjoyed it decently, as I always do with Grisham's works. And yeah, I gave this 3 stars. And so yeah, this is the most you guys I have given on a wrap up in a month, because this is like I read 6 books, which I was very proud of. But yeah, June was a decent reading month for me. And yeah, it was a month that gave me my first like great book of the year, because I had been reading fair, good, decent books, but it gave me my first great books. And I'm happy to say that since then I've had like 2 other great books that I'll talk about in the July wrap up. So yes, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And I'm close to 100, so I'd love to get there very soon. And yes, thank you so much for watching. And what are you reading at the moment? I would love to know. What have you read recently that kind of blew your socks off, that just made you happy? And yes, I think that will be it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.